this is a nothing. Yes, did they play perfect? No, they still win. Yes.
What are you doing if the Celtics win the championship?
If the Celtics win championship, I might break my sobriety. I might act up.
We did it! You got him.
All the way.
Celtics versus Heat. Celtics in what?
4.
Celtics versus Knicks. Celtics in
4.
You got Celtics in 4?
Celtics.
Hell yeah.
Use a vocab word from a couple years ago. It's mind-boggling.
That's it, DRG. Let's go. What do you think for tonight? You think I'm worried about the Warriors? I ain't worried about them. Let's go, baby. 18, baby. Load up the boat.
Why would you say that?
Because
I'm not, no,
recently he's putting up games like
above our head for the players.
literally right now.
But I think when Marcus, especially Marcus, when he got traded, I think that was a wake-up call.
You think right now
Rob,
it's still New York?
I do. And when I think of the Celtics dynasty, honestly, one of the first names that comes to my mind is actually Brad Stevens.
Wow. What did we just watch? Was that real? Man, oh man. All right, what is going on, everybody? Welcome back into the Celtics Talk Weekly post-game show. I'm your host, Rob Ete, and joined with me is my co-host, Seamus Zarlingo, and a very special guest, Griffin Aldridge. You might know him from the Celtics Nation Rise podcast. Griffin will be joining us tonight. Thank you so much for joining us. Guys, tonight, the Boston Celtics put on a rather unusual performance at home at the TD Garden. No Jason Tatum, no Drew Holiday, no Kristaps Porzingis. No problem for the Boston Celtics. 128-118 was your final score. Guys, let's kick it right off the bat. And this is going to be a little unusual here, but how about this tonight, guys? For the first time in Celtics history, the Boston Celtics had 2 players score over 40 points, and their names are not Jaylen Brown or Jason Tatum. But how about Peyton Pritchard and Derek White? Guys, tonight it feels like the initial thoughts might be surrounded around 2 certain somebodies, and I cannot wait to hear what you guys have to say.
my goodness. Go ahead, Griffin. Welcome to the program.
Yeah. I just want to start off because, I'm so excited for this moment. It's one that you don't ever see. You would, Rob, you already said it. You think about that. 2 40-point performances in the same night, and it's not Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. And Jaylen Brown played tonight, and he only had 18 points. And it's how is Jaylen Brown still playing, and Derek White and Peyton Pritchard both had 40? It's surreal. It's incredible. And sorry, I was just so hyped watching the game, and I just, sorry to cut you off. I just so excited for that. That's incredible.
No, the fact of the matter is what we saw tonight was Celtics history. I mean, 2 players putting up 40 points in the same exact game, and it really exemplifies how much talent resides on this particular Celtic team, because the other night, we almost saw this the other night against the Cleveland Cavaliers. Jason Tatum put up 46 points, Jaylen Brown put up 37, and then just a few nights later, it's Peyton Pritchard putting up over 40 points, 43 to be exact, and Derek White coming away with 41. How crazy is that? That is just outrageous. We think about Brown and Tatum, how good they are, and how many points they can rack up on any given night, yet the Celtics have 2 guards, one coming off the bench in Peyton Pritchard, who can also go out there and score 40. And those aren't the only players on the Boston Celtics we think about when we think about 40 points. Kristaps Porzingis is another player who on any given night could go out and get you a 40-point game. And Drew Holiday, he's had 40-point games as an all-star in the past too. So looking at this entire Celtic roster, tonight's game really exemplified how much talent resides on the Celtic roster in total. And Peyton Pritchard did it against his hometown team. There's definitely some extra motivation there. Seems like every time the Celtics go up against the Blazers, Peyton Pritchard holds some extra motivation. But outside of Peyton Pritchard, Derek White, both of those guards, I mean, we think about the guard matchup too. on the other team. We think about Anthony Simons and Shaden Sharp and even Scoot Henderson coming off the bench for the Portland Trailblazers. Those are all supposed to be quality young guards in the NBA, still trying to prove themselves, of course, that is, but they're still quality young guards in the NBA. And yet the Celtics, they have the better guards tonight in Derek White and Peyton Pritchard, especially when that rotation is a little bit thin. Those two guys put up NBA history, and the Celtics felt like this was never a game that was really in doubt. Although, as we'll see in the lead tracker, there were some moments in there for the Boston Celtics that didn't look all that pretty. But the second half, the sea of green returned.
You guys summarized it perfectly. First of all, on the first sphere of it, right? It was a special thing to watch. I mean, it was fun. I mean, it was really, I was sitting there on my couch watching this game, just enjoying what I was watching, right? I wasn't really too locked into the X's and O's tonight. It was more so, let me sit back and just watch and enjoy this, the what is going on. Because again, this is the first time in Celtic history this has happened. This hasn't happened, guys. Forget Celtic history. This doesn't happen often, right? We we'll talk about a certain other time this has happened before a little bit later on, but like this isn't normal to have two guys score 40 points in the same night, even if they're your two best players, is ridiculous. To have one come off the bench and score 40 and have the other one be your fourth option, that is special. Seamus, I agree. This shows how deep this Celtics team is. When you hear guys say, I don't know if Cleveland has what it takes to beat Boston in 7 games. I don't know if Denver has the artillery to beat Boston in 7 games. This is exactly what they're alluding to. This is what we are talking about. We have 5 legitimate guys who can now officially, because Peyton Pritchard and Derek White have entered that conversation, can go out and get you 40 any given night. They were flamethrowers. They weren't missing. And I got to give a lot of props to Peyton Pritchard and Derek White, because in moments of the game where the Celtics were up big, they did not try to take over. They did not try to make it the Peyton Pritchard, Derek White show. They continued to play the Celtic brand of basketball that they needed to in order to make a win. Yes, Portland closed the gap towards the end, but Boston shut the door really quick. They did what they needed to do. They got the stop towards the end of the game that they needed to get in order for this to be a win. So very, very impressive. Seamus, you mentioned it. Let's hop right into the lead tracker. And you talk about the sea of green, and it's like the exact moment Peyton Pritchard and Derek White take over. I mean, this is the definition of what a sea of green looks like. Guys, tonight, 25 points, the largest lead for the Boston Celtics. Despite trailing by 6 points there, halfway through that second quarter, you see there Portland, biggest lead of the night being 6 guys. Boston and Portland found themselves 15 times this lead changed. So this was a relatively back and forth close game there through really 2 quarters, almost 2.5 quarters. And then eventually Boston just ran away with it. This is an untraditional game tracker. The sea of green was back half of it, guys. But again, this is a lead tracker that's been a little up and down over the past 5 games. So what did you like tonight from Boston? Obviously, Peyton Pritchard and Derek White, they helped. But, what did you like specifically in that second half when that sea of green really took over?
Could I say this is going to be a random one, but I want to say Jordan Walsh. One thing that impressed me is kind of just, I know this is kind of off-topic name, but Jordan Walsh just kind of impressed me in his efforts, and I think like having him out there kind of to fill the role of Tatum in that sea of green in that second half, he was just aggressive, and I wrote this down in my notes too. He would grab rebounds and he would just fight for them, and I love that. Just coming from a player who, when I played in the paint, that's a big thing for me, is how aggressive you are on getting rebounds, and that's what Jordan Walsh was tonight. Obviously, he didn't have a ton, but he still was aggressive, and I loved his just effect on the boards. And he's kind of a player where with that second half, obviously, like you guys said, it was Derek White and Peyton Pritchard tonight, but that's just kind of a player that really stood out to me that honestly doesn't get a lot of credit because he obviously still young and still a bench player.
Well, ultimately, during the second half tonight, I think what was the most impressive thing from the Boston Celtics, and really, I wouldn't even say just the second half, it really was the entirety of the game, is they kept the lead growing. And yes, it dwindled there a little bit in the fourth quarter, but by that time, it was kind of like we were playing with our food a little bit. And that was a portion of the game where I would actually expect us to maybe relinquish a little bit of the lead, because all of a sudden the crowd's getting up, guys are starting to go a little bit away from the game plan and just kind of play hero ball in a certain sense. At that point in the game, we were trying to get extra points for Peyton Pritchard and Derek White there, and they were getting all their points on their own tonight, but especially at the end, you feed the hot hand. But the Celtics, what was one of the more impressive things is they kept the lead growing quarter after quarter in this game, because we've seen games in the past, particularly the past weekend, it was the Nuggets game and the Cleveland Cavaliers games. Those games, the Celtics had and held big leads in at certain points of time. And it felt like at the end of the quarters, each quarter, it would always kind of read, oh, Celtics won by 3, or oh, Celtics won by 1. When in that quarter, we held a 17-point lead, say in the third quarter against the Cleveland Cavaliers. We held a substantial lead against the Denver Nuggets at a certain point in time, yet we would finish off quarters, and instead of us saying, oh, we won by 10 or we won by 12, and we actually went ahead and obliterated the Nuggets or the Cavaliers in those quarters. Instead, we just won by the margins. It was by the margins, and then eventually, we either lost the Cavaliers game or just won the Nuggets game by 7. Tonight, it felt much different, where it did go back and forth there. But if you look at all the line scores, you look at the end of the first quarter, halftime, the end of the third quarter in particular, that lead kept growing for the Celtics, and the Celtics were actually able to finish out quarters well and go into either halftime or the quarterly breaks with a comfortable lead. I thought the other 2 games this weekend, which were tougher matchups, so you look at the opponents, the Cavaliers and the Nuggets, definitely a little bit tougher than the Blazers, although the Blazers have been mighty good as of late. The Celtics, this game, it felt like they could go into the breaks. They went to the breaks strong, and they went to the breaks with more cushion behind themselves, and I thought that's actually what helped the team tremendously throughout portions of this game tonight, even though you see in that lead tracker. It went back and forth, specifically in that first half, but by the second half, the Celtics just absolutely put it on the Blazers, and then they end up having time for both rest and time for just Geno time, hero ball all over the place for everybody on the end of the bench. So that was definitely fun at the end.
I'll tell you what, I was impressed. This Portland team really isn't 28-35 bad. They impressed me tonight, especially in that first half, and even in that fourth quarter. I agree with what both of you said again. And Seamus, was something you said. Boston kind of likes to play. Sometimes they have a tendency to play within the margins when you're up by 13, 14, 15, right? And tonight, they were able to extend that lead. And in today's NBA, a 15-point lead is really like a 2005 7-point lead, right? It really is, with the amount of sheer volume, that these teams of 3-pointers these teams can take and make. 15 really is not a substantial, comfortable lead in today's NBA. And I think Boston has fallen a little victim to that recently, and they've been playing within the margins and leaving that door open for a potential, 8-0 run makes a 15-point game, a 7-point game, and that an 8-0 run can happen in the NBA now in 30 seconds. I mean, it's just like that, how fast those leads can go away. And tonight, I agree, they did a great job. And then Jordan Walsh, I'm happy you brought him up tonight, Griffin, because Jordan Walsh is a player that we have been talking about, feels like a little bit more recently on this program. And it's really dating back to that Cleveland game where we watched Sam Hauser kind of die out there on an island. And we're going to talk about Sam Hauser tonight. Oh boy, do I have some fun things to say about Sam Hauser. But tonight, I think Joe going to Walsh in a night where offensively you were covered. You didn't need anything much off the bench offensively. When one of your guys gets you 43 off the bench, you're not looking for that. Tonight, Neemias Queta, Jordan Walsh guys, they came in and they really kind of mucked up the game. They were physical on the glass. They were making hustle plays. One play that stood out to me in the first half was a missed 3 rebound Jordan Walsh, or it was a Derek White steal into a missed shot, into a Jordan Walsh rebound, into a kick out Derek White 3. Plays like that is what we're looking for out of Jordan Walsh. He gets minutes. That's how Nemi has really carved a rollout for him, right? He's a great roller to the rim. He can control the dunker spot well, and he really makes those energy effort plays that kind of Boston needs off the bench. They don't need a whole lot of scoring here, especially when they're full strength. So when you look at Walsh and you look at Nemi, guys, obviously come playoff time, there might be some stir up, but I just want to ask this. because the play of Sam Hauser as of late has been a little concerning. His defense has been atrocious. In the shooting, in which is supposed to make up for his defense in the margins, hasn't really been there. And it hasn't all year. He's dipped under 40% on the season compared to 42, I believe he shot last year. He has not been as effective behind the arc. Do you see a world in again, this could be far-fetched, but do you see a world where Jordan Walsh right now could hold more value for the Celtics than a Sam Hauser?
I would say yes. I'm gonna say this. I'm gonna say with Sam Hauser, I want to ask this question though, really quick. Do you guys think this could kind of tie into the injuries this season? Obviously, we've seen Sam Hauser has had some struggles all season long, but there's been a late concern with injury with him. Obviously, with that lower back. Could we really quick cover that? Do you think that could possibly be a thing why he's been struggling? I know this has been.
I got things locked and loaded. I don't know what it is with Sam. And again, this is Sam Hauser. To preface this real quick, Sam Hauser was a guy, and Seamus, I don't know if you remember this, but back in 2021, 2022, I was a Sam Hauser stan. I was calling for Boston to call him up from the G League. I believed in him. His sharpshooting ability is exactly what that 22 championship, well, not championship, but NBA Finals appearance team was missing. And he was phenomenal from behind the arc. Defensively, he wasn't terrible. Like, he can stand his ground. As of late, he has been atrocious defensively. And from behind the arc, he isn't providing you the efficiency he needs to in order to make that defense, that lack of defense, worth it. So I don't know if it's his injuries. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's his back. Seamus, I don't know if you think it's his back. Personally, though, I do believe there's a real hole at that bottom of that lineup and that eighth man off the bench that is going to get playoff minutes. And I don't know if Sam Hauser is the guy right now. I don't know.
Well, I'm glad Griffin brought up the injury possibility, because I was actually going to bring up the same thing, seeing him walk off the floor tonight in a little bit of a hobbled manner. I think potentially look at the injury history of Sam Hauser, and you could say, well, is the back affecting his three-point percentage this season and the way he's releasing the ball, the way he's pulling up for shots? Certainly, I think his injury history from particularly this season and with his back could be bugging Sam Hauser a little bit. But regardless of whether the injury bug is on Sam Hauser, I believe that Sam Hauser, your question, Rob, about could Jordan Walsh hold a little bit more value than Sam Hauser at this point in time, I think that's a possibility. I've been calling out for it for actually quite a while now as well, going, if Sam Hauser, if he's not hitting his shots, he's not giving you anything offensively, he's a legitimate negative defensively. If you're not giving anything offensively and you're giving a negative defensively, well, then you're just a negative player. And from that standpoint, I do look at a guy like Jordan Walsh and I go, well, Jordan Walsh, he has produced up in Maine. He's a second-year guy. There is some upside there with Jordan Walsh, and he is a multi-year college guy as well. When he was at Arkansas with the Razorbacks, I look at Jordan Walsh and go, why not give him a chance? At least at this point in the season with 20 games left on the schedule, why not give Jordan Walsh a chance? Because this is a guy at the beginning of the year you thought, oh, well, maybe in preseason, the way he was handling the ball, playing on the defensive end of the floor, maybe Jordan Walsh is somebody who could slot into the rotation for the Boston Celtics. Hasn't really worked out this year because Jordan Walsh's offensive game is still very raw, and defensively does make some young guy mistakes at certain points of the game. But his development is crucial for this Boston Celtics team. Potentially, if Sam Hauser's not giving you anything off the bench, and if they're not willing to use Torrey Craig as much as we thought Joe Mazzulla and the coaching staff would use, then Jordan Walsh is certainly the next player up on that Ford list that the Boston Celtics and everyone has to be looking at, going, he has to get more minutes. He has to develop a little bit more into a role the Celtics can use him in the playoffs. And it's not going to be a substantial role. It's not going to be 25 minutes a night. Can he fill minutes here and there? Can he play in an 8-minute stint? Can he play 10 minutes a night? Can he play just in between the margins and really fill the minutes for guys like Brown and Tatum when they need a couple of rest minutes during the playoffs and the Celtics don't have much forward depth off the bench? So Jordan Walsh at this point in time, I look at him and go, can he hit a couple of corner threes? Can he hit a couple of wing threes? We're not asking him to do a whole lot offensively. Might make the other team's ability to help defensively rather, a little bit better, knowing that he's not an offensive threat. That could be something. But still, Jordan Walsh on the offensive end, just go out there, hit a couple of shots. and defensively go out there and be exactly how he's been his entire college career and up in Maine. Be a hound dog. Obviously, from the positioning side of things, that's not as easy as said. It's not as easy as it's said. However,
Right.
from an effort standpoint, we've talked about it so many times this season where defensively, it can sometimes just boil down to the effort somebody is putting in on the defensive end of the floor. And Jordan Walsh, if he goes out there and he's putting in the defensive effort, if he can hit a couple of shots offensively, yeah, I do believe that Jordan Walsh could hold a lot more value than Sam Hauser off the bench for the Celtics within the forward rotation.
And you look at what Boston's bench provides you, right? Let's break it down here. The core 9 we'll look at, or not 9, but the first 4 off the bench, right? That are kind of your, those are your playoff, it's viewed as your playoff rotation, right? Those guys, Peyton Pritchard, right? What does he give you? He gives you amazing isolation play, right? He gives you a little bit of dog mentality, a lot of dog mentality, right? But he gives you that scrappy, will pick you up 94 feet. Isn't the best defender, but I definitely have not watched Peyton Pritchard outside of that New York game against Brunson. I haven't really watched Pritchard much this year and thought to myself, okay, this guy's a defensive negative. In totality, Pritchard gives you a lot of isolation scoring and a hefty push and boost offensively. Then you look at Al Horford, kind of your utility guy off the bench, right? We saw against Denver, he can get you 18, 15 in that range, right? Can get you some rebounds. He's the Swiss Army knife. You don't really know what you're going to get with him on any given game, but he can give you anything. Then you look at Luke Cornett. Luke Cornett, right? Really an offensive focus for the Celtics. He does a stand-up job defensively. He holds down the fort down there on the glass. He does a solid job. But really, Luke Cornett's value holds within that high pick and roll. So that's more offense, right? So you're looking at it here in really 2 out of the 3 guys already. And even Horford offensively presents spacing and mismatch attacking. He can go into the paint. So that's 3 guys there that give you offensive boosts, and they're great at spacing and aren't net negatives defensively. So my question is what value does Sam Hauser bring in if that 3-point shot's not falling? Because his role is spacing and efficient 3-point shooting. If you help off Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, you are going to pay if the Sam Hauser is the one that gets caught missed on rotations, right? That is his value. That hasn't been his value. And you look at on the defensive end of the ball, Griffin, he has been, I think the injury shows up. If it's anywhere, it's on the defensive end of the ball. He's been getting torched. And this is a game that he should not be getting torched. This should be a game Sam Hauser thrives in against the Portland Trailblazers. So I think if you look at the dynamic of the bench, Torrey Craig's a name, right? But the question is can he provide enough defense and offense? And is that shot going to fall when he's open to get playing time? His age, 34. Personally, I think that benefits us in the playoffs. The other guy is Jordan Walsh. And I do think there's a role out there for him, Griffin. I really do.
I want to add on to that. So kind of with Sam Hauser, we talk about kind of backtracking to last year. Remember that game against the Wizards where he almost had the 3-point record?
Right.
It's kind of like this year, like we've been mentioning, it's not the same Sam Hauser. It's not the Sam Hauser we're used to. Who steps up? And there's so many options. And from a guy living in Maine, seeing Jordan Walsh play a lot, I think that could be the guy. I mean, I watched him pretty much develop last year, and you guys hit it right on the head. Like, Jordan Walsh is that guy, and especially coming into the later parts of the season, you got to give him more time. Right now is the time to develop Jordan Walsh for playoffs because you have those games coming up that are weaker games. Obviously, you still have that one against LA, but this is time where Jordan Walsh needs to get minutes and needs to be a developed player. Obviously, he's had a lot of time, and you've seen him get a lot of time earlier in the season, like perhaps against Milwaukee when that was more so a competitive game to kind of get him used to it, get him into it. But it's definitely a player that I've seen, and I think personally he reminds me kind of obviously a lot, not nearly as great, but kind of like a Tatum build. Power forward, he could shoot the ball, he's excellent, and that's a player that really stands out to me. If Sam Hauser can't produce for you, Jordan Walsh is definitely that option.
I just also think Sam Hauser has been so bad that you have to look a different direction. Like it has been in my eyes, and maybe
Sam
I'm off.
Hauser. what a better question is surrounding Sam Hauser to me is, why does Joe Mazzulla think it's going to work this late in the season? I mean, it's not worked all season with Sam Hauser off the bench. I mean, it's worked in terms of us getting where we are now, 44 wins, 18 losses, and Sam Hauser producing once in a blue moon and filling minutes within the rotation, sure. But Sam Hauser, he's not been efficient all season long. That's the proof was in the pudding with his numbers 3-point wise for a large sample size of this season. Sam Hauser hasn't hit his 3-point shots defensively. He hasn't been that great of a player. So I'm looking at Joe Mazzulla and the coaching staff right now going, what makes them think it's going to get any better with Sam Hauser? And that's why I also question if guys like Torrey Craig and Jordan Walsh are going to get some run these next 20 games to figure out whether or not they can actually be legitimate playoff rotation guys over a guy like Sam Hauser. And when you think about Joe Mazzulla as not a very on-the-fly in-game adjuster, but in the playoffs, those adjustments can be quick. They have to happen quick because sometimes your season is on the line and those adjustments mean everything. The little adjustments mean everything. I think back to a series in 2017 with the Boston Celtics taking on the Chicago Bulls. They lost the first 2 games at the Garden, went down 0-2 in the series. Well, who came into the starting lineup? It was Gerald Green for Amir Johnson, and the Celtics, the Brad Stevens made that adjustment on the fly. Now, it wasn't in game, but it was from game to game in the playoffs, and he decided, Amir Johnson, I'm giving your minutes to Gerald Green. We're going to start Gerald Green. We're going to ride Gerald Green throughout that playoff series. And the Celtics, they eventually won 4 straight games. Rajon Rondo was, of course, hurt the rest of that series with a wrist injury, which played a huge part in that series everybody talks about. Got to disclaim that, of course. But at the same time, the Celtics made that adjustment within their rotations. Brad Stevens made that adjustment within his rotations. And I think right now with Joe Mazzulla, that's what we're kind of questioning is Joe Mazzulla capable of actually doing that when the time comes due? Because Sam Hauser, he hasn't really worked all season within the certain position he's in. And when I say worked, I feel like I'm giving that a little bit of an unfair title from the standpoint of it's worked for a good record. He's filled minutes and he's been out there, but he hasn't produced at the level in which we thought he was going to this season and has in the past. And I do wonder if guys like Torrey Craig and Jordan Walsh could take over some of his minutes come playoff time when the Celtics might vitally need him at some point in time.
I also think you look at it and you especially a player like Jordan Walsh. Again, I think the consensus here is we've kind of seen it when he's on the court. There is a net positive he can give. Walsh can give you positive minutes defensively and offensively. He doesn't got it. His role out there doesn't have to be much. So if you're thinking about it and you do roll with Sam Hauser, right, come playoff time and it's not working and you're in a game 4 and you're down 2-1 per se, and you're kind of looking at it and you're like, okay, we got to go somewhere else. Or God forbid you go down 0-2. And I'm not saying that's going to happen. But in this scenario, you got to look at it. You never know. So now you're looking towards a bench where Craig hasn't had much run with this lineup, right? Craig's a veteran guy, but in terms of the run he's had with us, he's not really accustomed and set into what Boston's about and how they play. Then you look at Jordan Walsh, where, last year he was half the time he spent was up in Maine. He's a young guy, promising, but needs run and hasn't really played in many big games. So where do you go? What's the guy off the bench right now where if it's not working for Sam, you feel confident and comfortable that they're ready for the moment? And I think right now, you look at it, Hauser really has been pretty bad for about 67%, or I'd say close to 80% of the games they've played this year that Hauser's been in, he has not looked good. There's been a handful where his shot was falling and he looked sharp defensively and offensively. Again, that shot behind the arc was going. But I look at that and you start to think, like, again, God forbid Boston needs to make an adjustment and things aren't rolling. Walsh is a guy that could be there for you, but he needs a little bit more run. And I need to see that, because right now, guys, I'm so out on Sam Hauser right now. I don't know if it's his back. I don't know what it is, but I mean, I do not feel comfortable right now with him playing big minutes for us. I don't.
And I kind of want to add on to that. It's like we talked about this on the podcast too. Like kind of when he was playing in that Cleveland game, it was just atrocious. Like with him and Donovan Mitchell was getting whatever he wanted. And it's not even the fact offensively, it's defensively too. And that's what you've seen the Celtics struggle with a lot this year, defense. And obviously, we're eager to get defensive players, and Walsh fills those shoes. Walsh is a lot better of a defensive player than Sam Hauser, especially as of recently. Sam Hauser, the thing about him is when a player isn't giving you offense, you expect them to make up for it on the defensive side of the ball. And that is not what Sam Hauser has been doing. You saw it. I don't want to completely put the blame on Sam Hauser against that Cleveland game, but you kind of look for him in that sense, because if he's not producing for you offensively and he's not giving you anything defensively, then what's going on? That's my big concern. And like, yet again with Walsh, he, like, obviously, if he won't give you a bunch of points, he's going to make up for it on the defensive side of the ball. And that's huge.
Yeah. And kind of piggybacking off that, you don't have a lot of versatility. You don't have a lot of versatility in that position. So it's like your options are slim. And I think out of the 3 guys you got off the bench, and again, you look at this and it's not going to be a whole big problem. I don't think this is a problem that could potentially cost you a series, because the playoff rotation, you're going to get around 40 minutes a game of Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum time, just when they're on the court, right? Maybe even more. Then there's not going to be a whole lot of basketball being played without one of the 2 on the court. You might not even get any minutes without one of the 2 of them on the court. So really that wing area, right, to slot in, we're not asking for much. We're asking for about 10 minutes. But I think the direction here really is which guy right now in those 10 minutes that you need from that 8th spot are going to give you the most production on either end of the floor, right? Which guy can you find has the most production on one side of the ball? I think right now the answer is Walsh. Now, can Hauser get there? I'm not saying I'm fully out, right? I'm not saying Sam can't do it, but what evidence shows me right now, Sam hasn't done it, and I don't know if he will do it.
Can I say something else too? I think it's just the fact that he was playing so poorly today, and he still played 32 minutes. It's the fact that Joe Mazzulla is seeing, like, all right, Sam Hauser isn't giving a lot for you tonight, and he's still playing 32 minutes. It's like, why don't you put in Torrey Craig tonight? This is a night where kind of you see the Trailblazers are a weaker team, and you got to go after them. And especially if Sam Hauser isn't doing anything for you defensively, and he's not doing much for you offensively, that's when you call in Torrey Craig or even the new guy, Miles Norris. You got to try other options out. You got to test, and you got to see what works out, because in 32 minutes, if he's not giving you much, why is he playing 32 minutes? That's my
Exactly. No, I agree. And I do believe it's a problem. And it's something I think Joe's got to tap into a little bit. If he does, will he is the question. I don't know. But could he? Should he? Absolutely. But let's take a look here tonight, guys, to kind of it feels like the topic and the guy everyone's been waiting for here. Our SeatGeek player spotlight of the game, guys, but Peyton Pritchard. I mean, it should have been a dual one. It deserved to be a dual one, but pick your poison. Which one did you want tonight? We picked Peyton Pritchard, guys. Before we talk about Peyton Pritchard, I just want to give a quick shout out to the sponsor of the post-game show, guys, SeatGeek. SeatGeek is the best ticketing app out there on the market, guys. And right now, the Boston Celtics are gearing up for what could be a back-to-back title defense run. And there is no better app out there to use to see that live than SeatGeek, guys. SeatGeek has you covered for all the best prices on the market. At checkout, use code Celtics Weekly for $20 off your first purchase. It doesn't stop there, guys. SeatGeek has you covered for all live events in your area as well. So again, code Celtics Weekly at checkout. The link will be at the top of the description down below. Guys, let's take a look at Peyton Pritchard tonight. 43 points, 10 rebounds, 5 assists. He was a plus 12 on the night. But this is the part that wows me. 43 points on 14 of 20 shooting from the floor, 10 of 16 from deep. He was a perfect 4 of 4 from 2 and a perfect 5 of 5 from the free throw line, guys. Peyton Pritchard tonight did it in every area of the game, and it was probably arguably the most dominating Celtics performance we had seen this year. It was immaculate. So when you look at Peyton Pritchard, and we're going to get into Derek White, don't worry, we're not leaving Derek White out tonight because he deserves 41 points, deserves to score 41 points and not win player spotlight. I mean, gosh, I mean, that is nuts. But guys, you look at Pritchard, and more specifically, this has been a guy that has kind of been the front runner for Sixth Man of the Year all year long. You put up a performance like this. Does this seal the deal for Peyton Pritchard in his Sixth Man of the Year hopes?
I was going to ask you that earlier. I was going to say, does this solidify
Felt like a signature performance.
It did.
Yeah.
It felt like a signature performance for the Sixth Man of the Year. I mean, hometown team, 43 points off the bench. You steal the show from Derek White, which ultimately I agree, Rob. 41 points, no player spotlight. I mean, we gotta definitely after the past week, we have to figure out the dual spotlights, player spotlights, add the S onto the end because Peyton Pritchard and Derek White, they deserve player spotlights tonight. The other night, Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, they certainly deserve the player spotlights, but better of the two, Jason Tatum and Peyton Pritchard tonight. This one definitely felt like the signature Sixth Man of the Year capping performance. I know there's still 20 games left in the season, but Peyton Pritchard's been leading in the odds all season long. He's really not lost a step within his production off the bench, and nobody out there. I mean, really, you look at the Sixth Man of the Year candidates, and two of them are on the Cavaliers, so they're kind of redundant towards each other, and DeAndre Hunter and Ty Jerome. But Peyton Pritchard, he's been leading in the odds most of the season. He's not really lost a step, and you look at tonight's performance, 43 points, and the thing that makes it so big for Peyton Pritchard is it's against his hometown club. I mean, this is a team that we always expect Peyton Pritchard to play well against. We think about Peyton Pritchard dropping 92 points in the Portland Pro-Am a couple of years ago when he was absolutely scorching Summer League down in Vegas. He went and kind of abandoned the team in Vegas, went up to Portland, dropped 92. Everybody wanted him to play in the championship game. Didn't perform in the same way that at that moment in time, but against the Portland Trailblazers, against his hometown team, everybody expects Peyton Pritchard to play well, and he did more than play well tonight. 43 points, 10 rebounds, 5 assists. That's a star's stat line. I mean, that's an absolute star's stat line. And Peyton Pritchard, he views himself as a star. And they were talking about it on the broadcast, how much confidence he really has within his game. And that has not waned whatsoever the entire time Peyton Pritchard's been with the Boston Celtics. And I'm really happy it's starting to culminate in a lot of performances. Maybe not quite like this. 43, 10, and 5 is a little insane, but we've seen those performances from Pritchard, 27, 28 points and 30-point nights laced in there for Peyton Pritchard. It's really all starting to pay off for him in a championship last year and then this year, potentially the Sixth Man of the Year, along with maybe a back-to-back championship for Peyton Pritchard. The only thing I would like to see him get further on down the line is get that paycheck, because we all know he's on one of the best bargain deals in the entire NBA. And just imagine $6 million for a player who can put 43 points up on any given night when your two star players, or really, I should say, the one star player, Jason Tatum, he's out of the lineup. But then Jaylen Brown, he kind of takes a back seat there and allows Peyton Pritchard and Derek White to take over the keys. When you have a player coming off the bench making the amount of money Peyton Pritchard is making right now, when you have that on your roster, you should be a championship contender. You should be able to fill out the rest of your roster with stars and good role players, as the Boston Celtics have done, because Peyton Pritchard, he is one of the most valuable boosts to this entire Celtics club. Brown and Tatum, don't get me wrong, lead the way, but Peyton Pritchard might be the most important Celtic out of everybody on the Boston Celtics for the role he plays off the bench, the scoring he gives the Celtics off the bench, and also the energy boost as well for the contractual value Peyton Pritchard holds. And tonight, this has to be Peyton Pritchard's best performance of his entire career, and it came against his hometown team late in the season. Sixth Man of the Year on the line. I think it was a signature performance for that, and I do believe Peyton Pritchard will walk away with that award when it's all said and done this season.
Yeah, I just wanted to say this too with Pritchard. The biggest thing for me that stands out is you guys got to think, recently, before this championship, he wanted to leave and get a bigger role on another team, because obviously you saw a couple years ago, Boston wasn't giving him that role here. And tonight, it just makes it, and this year, all year long, he's just been balling out, and it kind of is in a sense where they're like, all right, we don't want you to go anywhere and have a big role anywhere else. We want you to stay here, and we'll give you a bigger role here. And that's what happened. And look at this. I just want to say, did any of you guys see this from Peyton Pritchard? I know I did, because you look, even I forget if it was a like an AAU game or something, but he had 91 points. He's fully capable of scoring these big point games. But the big thing is, you obviously see Joe Mazzulla said it. They don't have a play around Peyton Pritchard. He just scores at will. And it's just incredible that he can perform like this and just have big games like this. And it makes you wonder, it's like, all right, nights that he's going off like this, it's over for, because if Pritchard could give you numbers like this, it's just incredible. And we know he's capable of it. Like he did it tonight. And it's just amazing. Amazing night for sure.
He's more than capable of it. And you know what, Seamus, I'm getting kind of frustrated with you. I'm not going to lie, because a year ago today, or not today, but a year ago around this time, we had a certain conversation centered around a certain somebody who turned out to be pretty good. And I don't know if you remember this, but this year, and I can't remember if this was on camera or not. So maybe this was a behind the scenes conversation, but we had a conversation, and something I said was Peyton Pritchard might just be another one of those really small guards that are really good at scoring. And what makes him worth it is his contract. And you look at what this guy has done and what he's doing for Boston, contributing in so many facets, of the game. I gotta eat my words, and this is the second consecutive year. So when it comes to Celtics bench players, I gotta keep my mouth shut when I'm talking to you, Seamus, because oh my God, was I wrong on this one? I'll admit it. I believe Pritchard holds more value than what I said it to be, and I just gotta let you know that. He'll come, don't worry.
Oh.
Maybe it won't. We're going to give it a second. Drum roll, please.
We need the sound effects.
Okay.
All right. Well, Seamus, he'll be right back. Seamus he's got some Wi-Fi problems. So, but yes. So again, to preface this, Seamus and I had a conversation centered around Peyton Pritchard. I was wrong. And I can't wait for him to get back and say, oh, well, you know what? Here's why you're wrong. But to your point, you're right. Peyton Pritchard, he scores the ball just at absurdly high rates. And you look around what his role really is he can play so freely under Joe Mazzulla. And I think that's really what, allows Peyton Pritchard and unlocks Peyton Pritchard. And I got to give a lot of credit to the Joe Mazzulla offense, because there really are no handicaps on him. There's no restrictions. He is playing freely out there, and he's playing off of guys like Jason Tatum, like Jaylen Brown, like Derek White, like Kristaps Porzingis. And I think that's huge because, Griffin, you look at how dynamic he is. You're 100% right. This guy is an isocentric, just ball dominant, just bucket getter, right? But he can give you other things. He can be a spot up catch and shoot, 3-point shooter. He can work off the ball and come off a screen. He can get downhill and get you a bucket. He can grab you 10 rebounds right alongside 43 points. He can push the pace. If you just need him to sub in with 5 seconds left, he can hit a big time shot, from center court going into the half in game 5 of the NBA finals, right? This guy his bag of tricks is so deep, and he really can do so much and provide so much. And to me, that's what makes him so special.
Yeah. He's just a player that I'm a big Pritchard fan. And this year I even got 2 Pritchard jerseys from how much I've loved his game. And it's just a player that I will admit, and people are going to call me out on this, I wasn't so hot on Pritchard originally. I was upset when he
neither was
out.
I. Neither was I.
I was upset when he wanted out, and I was like, well, don't you want to value a championship? Because we're more than capable of winning a championship. Why do you want to go off somewhere? Like, if I'm an NBA player, I'm valuing a championship over, going out and kind of getting a bigger role. I understand him, but like at the same time, like that's what upset me about Peyton Pritchard. But this year, and I want to say last year, it started obviously, and I kind of call me a bandwagon Pritchard fan, but it started with the half court shots, and it's like, wow, this guy can really do it. He's really a skilled player. Like, what is he doing? And that's what got you hooked on him. But this year, the performances he's been having all year up into this, like, you gotta look at it. And now look, 43 points. It's like, why was I ever hating on this guy? Like, why? What?
Right. Well, Seamus, we gotta do a quick live check. How we doing?
I think we're
good.
again.
No, we're good. That's all I needed. That's all I needed. There we go. There we go.
Got a little frozen there last time.
Yeah. So
No
we
idea
gotta
what's
have
going on.
we gotta have a follow up. Do you remember that conversation, or was that on camera? Or was that off camera? Do you remember?
First of all, you got to repeat yourself on what the conversation was,
Okay, I got you.
because you literally went right into it, and then it was
Right.
just black screen, just frozen screen, just nothing going on. I was like, well, I'll get the gist of this later, I guess.
So I don't know if you remember, and I can't remember if this was on camera or off camera, but we had a conversation, and the premise of the conversation was that essentially, in my eyes, Peyton Pritchard is just another small guard that can score the ball, and that's the most replaceable thing in the NBA. Guys like Quickly, guys like Maxey, there's different levels to them, but essentially they kind of all hold the same value to a championship team. I'm on air here to say I was wrong, and I was super wrong about Peyton Pritchard because I believe his value. And it's funny because a year ago we had a conversation about Luke Cornett, and I'm starting to get upset with you because you're starting to really show me out here on these shows because I'm getting these wrong, man.
Well, we never had the Peyton Pritchard argument on screen.
Okay,
I'll
so
say
that was
that
off
right now.
camera. So I just
So that was off camera.
I outed
The
myself.
the only Peyton Pritchard tiff I've ever had with anybody here is with Justin. Definitely.
Okay.
I mean that was
Okay.
that was the Peyton Pritchard regression thing earlier on in time. But Peyton Pritchard as a small guard, I think small guards certainly in the NBA don't hold as valuable of a position as say forwards or bigs do. But when you have somebody like Peyton Pritchard coming off the bench for the Boston Celtics, as they do with Peyton Pritchard, with his contract, what he brings to the team in terms of energy, what he brings in terms of scoring, particularly off that bench. I mean, if he was a starter doing that, that's a little bit different of a story because really the Celtics, they have a juggernaut starting five with Kristaps Porzingis, Derek White, Drew Holiday, and then Brown and Tatum as well. But off the bench, they really need that scoring help off the bench. They really need that extra boost off the bench. And we've seen this in the past in Celtics history play out so many times with a sixth man coming off the bench and playing a big role on the team. We've seen it on championship teams in the past, but even recently, we think about Marcus Smart. He did start near the end of his Celtics tenure, and he had to be slotted in there as a starter, but he really started out as a sixth man. He started out as a guard dog off the bench and really coming in with the team, bringing all of that energy in off the bench. And it really played a huge role on the Boston Celtics. Well, Peyton Pritchard, he's ultimately that player with the Boston Celtics now. And it's a little strange looking back because the Celtics had Marcus Smart when Peyton Pritchard was drafted. And Peyton Pritchard essentially replaced Marcus Smart out there. And he did it in a much different way. He does it more on the offensive end of the floor than he does defensively, but we know that Peyton Pritchard can get after it defensively and that his offensive game, we're really starting to see it uptick even more throughout the season. We really went crazy about Peyton Pritchard back in December because what he was doing was new at the time. And the excitement, I would say, leveled off just a little bit to expectations. Over time, we thought, oh, he's over expectations. He's over expectations. And we were getting excited over that. But then eventually the over expectations mark became the expectation for Peyton Pritchard. And through that time, I believe Peyton Pritchard, he's actually gotten better. And we haven't really recognized that as much as we should as Celtics Nation and as Celtics analysts here, because Peyton Pritchard, we talked about at the beginning of the season, he needs to get downhill. He needs to go towards the bucket and get those type of shots within his repertoire to actually be considered a high-level scorer and a multi-level scorer, a three-level scorer, and near all-star level scorer in the NBA. We know he can put up points consistently, but how he's getting those points also matters as well. And we know Peyton Pritchard, he has that mid-range game. He obviously has the three-point shot in his game from the standpoint of he actually averages. If you look at, he's one of the most efficient players in the NBA. If you really look at his shot range versus his shot percentage from that range, Peyton Pritchard is amongst the elite in the NBA. But the one thing we look at Peyton Pritchard and go, okay, he hasn't done that well his entire career, and he hasn't done that at volume, is really take the ball towards the rim and finish over bigger guys and guys his size. And yet we're starting to see Peyton Pritchard do that a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more. And with the shots we know he still has in his game, that midi, of course, that deep three in the bag for Peyton Pritchard, along with potentially some of the buckets he's now getting at the rim and at the free throw line. Peyton Pritchard, he's becoming a certified scorer with this Celtics team, and on the contract he's on right now, I mean, that's going to play as one of the biggest valuable pieces of value, I should say, for the Celtics over the next 2 to 3 seasons with this championship level core, because Peyton Pritchard, although he's not Jaylen Brown or Jason Tatum and of that importance to the Celtics, he is somebody that really gives the Celtics that one key player off the bench that they don't have to worry is going to walk away from the team, like we've seen other championship teams of the past have to suffer right away. Oh, we think about the Nuggets with Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. We think about the Milwaukee Bucks with PJ Tucker and some of their cast out there. Just right after they win the championship, they can't pay these guys right away and they walk. Peyton Pritchard, he's under contract for these next couple of years, and that's why he's going to be so big for the Boston Celtics, along with the fact that we forget he's still a developing player out there on the floor, and we're actually seeing that development as the season has gone along. So this season as a whole for Peyton Pritchard, the only thing that would make it better up to this point is finishing it out strong and finishing it out with the championship, because after tonight's performance, I really think we've seen that signature, Pacific Coast P performance tonight out of Peyton Pritchard at the Garden on the East Coast.
He's such a luxury to have when you pair him with this. And I think that's like, there's two factors that make Peyton Pritchard just worthwhile. One, the contract. You mentioned it, Seamus. I mean, what is he making? $6 million this year? And this is what he can provide. Yes, was this a crazy Peyton Pritchard game? But he's had 28, he's had 22, he's had this is the leading candidate for 6th man of the year, and he's making $6 million. That's one. The second value he holds is that when he's on the floor sometimes, next to him, you have to worry about Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, Derek White, and Kristaps Porzingis. And that is just so much firepower offensively. So he's the utmost luxury to have when you pair him with what the Celtics have right now. You know who else is the utmost luxury, guys? Derek White. And I see it, Seamus, and I'm going to run it because this was Derek White and not Jason Tatum, Peyton Pritchard tonight. And this is reminiscences of this. I mean, you want some comparison? This is viewed, guys, the LeBron James and Kyrie. I don't know if I prematurely put this up, but this is looked at as one of the, and again, a bigger stage against a much better team, right? So I'm going to pull the brakes back a little bit, but to put maybe into your brain how crazy this is. This game by Kyrie and LeBron is viewed as one of the best performances a duo has had in NBA history. In the NBA Finals, putting up 40 points each. It was the first time at any teammate, the only time two teammates have scored 40 plus points in the final. So that is the energy Derek White and Peyton Pritchard were on tonight, guys. How about 41 points for Derek White? And again, we mentioned it, first time in Celtic history this has happened, and their names aren't Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. Super, super weird, guys, but we've talked about Derek White time and time again. And this year was up and down for Derek White through the months of December and January. Seamus, this is a guy that we had highlighted, and the highlighter was a bright yellow, and it was popping off the page there for a little bit. And just about a week ago in an interview with Abby Chin, guys, he stated it felt like he got his joy back. He got his swagger back. He's ready to go. And guys, Derek White, I think it's official to say that Derek White is back, and he is better than ever, guys. How big was D White tonight?
I'm gonna say that I'm happy you mentioned that, because like you said, there was a lot of struggle with Derek White, and it was like we saw such a great year from him last year, and it wasn't the Derek White we were used to. And I'm so glad you said that, because this is just solidifies that he's back, and he's better than ever. I mean, you think about it going back to last year too, like how everyone was like, he's an all-star. Even going into this year, you're like, all right, he could still be an all-star. But tonight, that's an all-star performance. And like you were saying, player spotlight, it's so tough having to choose between both of them, because it's like on any other night, this would have been the player. Like, this would have been the player that gets the player spotlight. And it's like, how can you discredit this great night from him, but you can't. And I love the graphic you just showed, because it's so crazy to me that it's not Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, and people are gonna look back and be like, okay, this was 2025. How wasn't it Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown? And just the answer to that is just how deep the Celtics are. And it's more than just, okay, we have Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. No, we have a full team. We have players that any given night can step up and pop off. Like you mentioned earlier in the show, Drew Holiday could give you 40 points. Porzingis could give you 40 points. You look at all these players, and it just shows how deep the Boston Celtics are. And they're not just like, all right, we have one scorer. They're not just like other teams. We have so much depth. And it's like, that's what separates us from other teams. And that's why, all right, talking about Cleveland again, that's why when Cleveland, people are like, all right, Cleveland should scare you. It's like, look how much depth we have, and look how established we are. And it's just incredible that we could look at this and it not be Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. It was Peyton Pritchard and Derek White. And that's how incredible the Boston Celtics are. Sorry, yeah.
And what's even more impressive about this performance from Derek White and Peyton Pritchard is the fact the Celtics have multiple players on their roster who can take over in a situation where other guys are out. We think about Jason Tatum tonight out of the lineup. Well, he's actually a point forward for the Boston Celtics. He really runs the offense a lot of the time. The ball is in Jason Tatum's hands quite a bit on the offensive end of the floor. And he's really playing point guard. And then on the other end of the floor, he's guarding some of the bigger players, the bigger forwards, even the big guys out there on the floor. And Jason Tatum, he's a true point forward for the Boston Celtics. When he's out of the lineup tonight, and even on a night where Jaylen Brown, he plays a little bit of a lesser role within the lineup, thinking we're playing the Blazers, probably not going to go out there and give his full energy, his full effort. We understand that for some players out there, especially coming off the championship season last year, some of the opponents in between some of the bigger games. We understand that. But Derek White and Peyton Pritchard, they're given the car keys tonight to the offense. And what are they? They're super aggressive at getting their own shot. And that's something that's ultra impressive from the Celtics team, is how many guys can ultimately just mind their own shot out there. If Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, if they weren't around, you'd still have players on the Boston Celtics who could theoretically create their own shot to be a fairly good team within this league. Now, would they be the number one seed in the East? Would they be the number two seed in the East? Would they be top of the standings? Probably not. But the quality of players who reside on this team from an offensive playmaking and offensive shot creation standpoint is ultra impressive. You have Brown and Tatum at the top, but then you have Porzingis as well, who does well both getting set up from other players. We like to use him a lot in the pick and roll situations, a lot of those situations out there on the floor. But we know Porzingis in the low post, he can get his. And even during those pick and pop opportunities, he's somebody who can shoot off the dribble if he needs to. Now, he's not going to be a crazy ball handler and shooting off the dribble at any means, but he can take a dribble or two and shoot the basketball if he needs to. You have Kristaps Porzingis out there. But outside of that, Derek White and Peyton Pritchard, I mean, they're given the keys to the offense tonight. There's no Drew Holiday around. That's one of the guards out of the rotation. Jason Tatum is not playing. He's a point forward, as I mentioned earlier. And Kristaps Porzingis isn't out there. And it feels like Jaylen Brown's playing a lesser role. Well, those two guys are able to go out there and make the most of the opportunity. And that's what we see from other teams around the league, is we can tell if role players, how good they're going to be in terms of their minutes of contribution just by what they're able to do by themselves. I mean, think about role players who take over the spotlight. If they do nothing with it, well, that's something that actually shows you something, in what is seemingly meaningless games against lesser opponents or two teams who aren't really in contention for anything. What those games really show you is what the production level of those role players could be if they actually were given more responsibility within offenses or even on the defensive end of the floor as well. And I think what's impressive from the Celtics team is when those role players are given more opportunity, they show out. They really do. And Derek White and Peyton Pritchard, they did that tonight and on Friday against the Cleveland Cavaliers. It wasn't the role players, it was the star players. It was Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum who, with Kristaps Porzingis and Drew Holiday out of the lineup, They went crazy in that game. No one else outside of really Derek White, who had 16 points that night, was contributing to the scoring margins. And yet Brown and Tatum, with the extra opportunities they had, they showed themselves to be not only superstars, but almost mega star players in that situation. So that's what's been very impressive about not only Peyton Pritchard, but Derek White as well. And just the entire Celtics team has, when they get the opportunity to go out there and perform, they've been able to do it this season. And that can't be said for every single team in the league.
It can't. It really can't. And we've said it all the time here on this program. This guy, Derek White, is the floor setter for this team. I mean, when he is playing his best basketball, it feels almost like this Celtics team, full strength, is impossible to beat. The guy can do it all. I mean, 41 points, guys, for Derek White in the win. It is, again, Griffin, you said it. It's like, how does he not win player spotlight, right? It's like, how is there a player that outshined him tonight? And Derek White has been a perfect fit in Boston. And I look at him and what in the up and down year he's had. And then you look at recently what he's been doing, and he was doing it. It was dynamic, 41 points, 9 threes, obviously, but he was getting into the paint. He was causing commotion defensively. He was really attacking the game from all three levels and both ways. And I think that's really, really important for Derek White. Even if his shot wasn't falling, his 3-pointer, he would still have a very good game. And I think that really is a deciding factor between what make great players great and subpar players subpar, right? What can you give me if that 3-point shot isn't there? Are you still an effective player if your shot's not falling? The answer for Derek White is absolutely he is. And tonight he showed it. And to me, to get big performances like this isn't normal. Like, this is not normal. And I think as Celtics fans or as Celtics, however you want to look at it, that's something you have to realize, that what we just saw tonight for your 4th option and your 6th option to do what they did, this is not normal. No other team, probably and I'd go as far as in NBA history, has the artillery that we see the Celtics team have. I mean, to really wrap your head around that, it is ridiculous. And I get it. Portland, right? They're a lower echelon team, actually 4-1 in their past 5 on an East Coast road trip. They've actually been playing some pretty good basketball as of late. I was getting trap game vibes from this, especially when I saw the injury report. But to see a game like this, two stars, right? Playing like stars, aren't really stars. In my eyes, they are, but I mean, it was special. And can we acknowledge that, how not normal this is? You don't see this across the NBA on any other team, and you probably don't see this ever in NBA history. To have 40 points off the bench and have another 40 in the starting lineup, and it's not your 2 all-stars, it's not your 2 all-NBA players. I mean, ridiculous. On the same night, ridiculous.
And this is the crazy part. So you kind of look at it, and you're kind of like, all right, it's the Trailblazers. But at the same time, like, even if it's a bad team, you don't expect Peyton Pritchard to go out there and score 40. You don't. Like, you did, like, you think about it. I would not expect him, especially coming off the bench like that, like, having a guy who's 6th man of the year go out there and score 40 is incredible. And Derek White to give you 41 too is just amazing. And you've talked about how, yeah, okay, the Trailblazers are kind of a lower team, and you got to think about that and take that into consideration. But you got to think, they still have some solid ball players on that team. And we can't discredit that fact. And it's the fact that still we went out there and we played incredible. And you're missing a lot of key players. And the lineup was a lot different than it usually is. Like, tonight, you didn't have most of your stars in there. So you're expecting to go out there, all right, it probably will be a closer game given the fact that you don't have all your stars out there. And it's just that Pritchard went off, Derek White went off, and it's, Rob, you said it, it's a game that just you've never seen before. And just coming on this, we were in awe. Just even watching it, I was in awe. I'm like, how is he hitting these? Like, he continues to do it. And it's like, I've never seen this performance before. And I've never seen anything like it. Just ever since I started watching basketball, this is surreal. Tonight has been surreal for a 6-man of the year candidate to do it. And Derek White, who we'll say he's a star on this team, but he is not the top dog. Like, he's not Jason Tatum or Jaylen Brown. And for him to go out there and give you 41 tonight, and Jaylen Brown kind of slacked off with 18. Okay, with the 18 points, yeah, he was kind of slacking off. He knew that Derek White and Peyton Pritchard had it. But it's like kind of if you watch the game, Jaylen Brown was irrelevant tonight. And it's like you still got that from Pritchard and Derek White. And it was incredible. And it was an experience that I've never seen before.
Yeah. I mean, it was.
And what really epitomizes this too for the Boston Celtics is looking at great championship teams of the past. You look at in the 80s, from the 80s, the Boston Celtics, they win 3 championships in the 80s. You look at the 60s as well, the Celtics going on their amazing run in the 60s, even dipping into the 50s. And then you look at the Celtics with the Big 3 era, and even now. What's really concurrent, what is correlated within some of those championship runs, we all know the star players and the all-time greats at the top of the roster, but those all-time greats, we think about Paul Pierce, he was not an all-time great with the Boston Celtics until he came away with that chip. And Paul Pierce before that came up short, Eastern Conference Finals, was even on garbage teams. Without the others, Paul Pierce would not be an all-time great within Celtics history. We would see him as a highly regarded player and somebody who scored a lot of points, put up a lot of numbers with the Boston Celtics in his time, did some winning, but without a championship and without the others, Paul Pierce would not be seen as great of a Celtics player as he is today. And I'm not even talking about the others in terms of Ray Allen and Kevin Garnett. I'm talking about the others, guys like Eddie House, guys like James Posey on that 08 team, guys like Sam Cassell on that 08 team. The others matter. And we've seen tremendous others in NBA history, not only with the Boston Celtics and the Celtic franchise, but everywhere across the NBA. And look at the 2015 Warriors with how much star power the 2015 Warriors had with Draymond Green, Steph Curry, Klay Thompson. Who wins Finals MVP? It's Andre Iguodala. And there's a myriad of examples of this in NBA history where the others are just as important as the stars at the top when it comes to actually going and winning the championship. And this performance by Peyton Pritchard and Derek White epitomizes how great of others, and others is kind of I would say it's a little bit disrespectful of a name, but it is what is termed out there for the role players on championship teams behind the star players. But the others on the Boston Celtics right now, guys like Peyton Pritchard, like Derek White, Drew Holiday when he's healthy, even Kristaps Porzingis, who can be an all-star level player himself, but is ultimately at the end of the day that third guy or even fourth guy down from Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. These are all the guys that make the Boston Celtics the great squad they really are. And yes, it starts with Brown and Tatum at the top and the star power at the top. But at the end of the day, all of the other players on a championship roster matter too. And they're the guys who really build up to that championship. And Peyton Pritchard and Derek White tonight, they really epitomize how well that other play from the Boston Celtics can be and really will be later on down the line this season and has been in seasons past that have already resulted in a championship run.
Exactly. And again, I've said this earlier in the show, and I'm going to say it again. If you ever questioned why people within the Celtics sphere, within the basketball sphere, are so high on this Celtics team going back to back and becoming the first dynasty we've seen since Golden State and really doing that, let this be Exhibit A. Right. This is why people say what they say about the Boston Celtics, because this is how dynamic and how special this group of guys are. So very, very, I mean, just incredible stuff tonight out of the Celtics.
And I just want to say this too.
Let me add this on too. The talk of the Portland Trailblazers. Oh, well, Pritchard and White and the Celtics. Oh, great. They beat the Blazers. Oh, great. They scored 40 against the Blazers. the Blazers, what's funny about this narrative is coming into this game, it was a little bit of a had that trap game feel to it, no doubt. But people
No
were
doubt.
looking at it going, okay, yeah, the Blazers, they've been playing well as of late, 4-1 over the last 5, or even 16-5 over the last 21 games for the Portland Trailblazers. They're a little bit more quality of a team than we thought during the second half of the season. I think part of that has to do with their rotation and really some of the guys who've been injured. You look at the veterans who the Portland Trailblazers initially rallied on their roster, whether it was last season or this season. Those veterans, they're not exactly playing for the Portland Trailblazers. They have a young lineup out there on any given night, and they have a familiar lineup that they're throwing out there every single night. Felt like the Trailblazers from before last season and even into this season, they didn't really know what their rotations were, and they're playing young guys here, then they're playing veterans, guys like Jeremy Grant, throwing him out there, and Matisse Thybulle as well. But now you think about the Portland Trailblazers and their lineups, they're a little bit more solidified. They're playing with more energy because they're young guys. They want to be paid in this league. They want to go out and win games in this league. But looking at the Portland Trailblazers, they're 16-5 in their last 21 games, 4-1 in their last 5. People were actually going, okay, watch out, Celtics. This could be a trap game, considering how well the Portland Trailblazers have been playing lately, how unseriously the Boston Celtics were taking this game, sitting out Jason Tatum, sitting out Drew Holiday, Kristaps Porzingis. They've been out for multiple games, but Jason Tatum clearly a rest night tonight. Looking at the circumstances, I don't see Peyton Pritchard's performance or Derek White's performance or the team's performance overall tonight as any less impressive just because it came against a team with a sub 500 record. I don't look at it that way whatsoever because coming into this game, this Portland Trailblazers team, people are giving them praise. People are going, this is the surprising team out west right now in that bottom tier of teams. This is the one surprising team, and in a good sense. So from that standpoint, to sit here and say afterwards when two guards go for 40 against the Portland Trailblazers, who aren't Brown and Tatum, and the Celtics pull out a good win on the Garden floor, to say, oh, well, it's just against the Blazers, should take, it's not as impressive because it was against a sub 500 team, a crappy team. No, this Portland Trailblazers team has been good as of late. And if they're going to get praised as of late for being as good, we got to give the Celtics, and particularly Peyton Pritchard and Derek White, their rightful praise for going up against this better team as of late and doing what they did. I don't think the opponent should ever take away from anything that ever happens in the NBA because really, if you look at every NBA team houses NBA players. And really, the teams on the bottom, it's not as if they're completely void of talent. They have talent on their rosters, just the arrangement of talent, the age of the talent, how those talents play together, the meshing of the talents within a rotation. The Portland Trailblazers have been a better team as of late, and the Celtics went in there and absolutely whooped them in the second half behind Peyton Pritchard and Derek White's 40-plus point performances on the night. And that really shouldn't be overshadowed by the opponent whatsoever when you're completely right, Rob. This is not normal in the NBA to have two role players drop 40 in a game and look like LeBron and Kyrie in Game 5. I mean, they scored more points than LeBron and Kyrie in Game 5 with Golden State. Pritchard and White tonight. That's beyond. That is beyond. I mean, I didn't think we would ever see anything like that with the Boston Celtics. This would be like Marcus Morris and name your player out there, Terry Rozier putting up 40 in a game together. That's really what it is. That's really what it's like tonight.
Could I just piggyback off of that too? Kind of.
100%.
I want to say this. So, kind of similar to what the broadcast was saying. This is a team that's young. They're young. They lost Damian Lillard a couple years ago. They're young. All right, we get that. But they're still a team that could really push the 10th spot in the West. And they could make a play-in appearance potentially, especially with the Mavs losing Kyrie. But one thing I do have to say, and I love it what Scal said earlier, how kind of they're one young star away from kind of putting themselves up there in the West. And it's still one that you look, it's still an impressive win at the end of the day because the Boston Celtics, like, they're shorthanded again. And I'm going to say it, I said it earlier, they're shorthanded. No Tatum, no Porzingis, no Holiday. That's 3 starters, all right? And you guys said it a lot. It looked like a trap game. And just going out there, because this Trailblazers team has potential to be a really good team in the future, and they've been playing good. So a lot of people are going to look past this game and be like, oh, well, it was just the Trailblazers, but it's not that. If you look more into this game and realize what's been going on and everything, then you would see how important of a game this was and how great of a game it was for your role players. It was just incredible night.
It was. And I want to say this too. If you match up the worst team, right, in NBA history and the best team in NBA history, I don't know 100 times. I don't know how many times two players on the same team are saying, like, say you match up the 96 Bulls versus the 2012 Bobcats. I don't know if MJ or Pippen, right, are going for 40 each in the same game. Maybe they do it twice in 100 games, 3 times, maybe, right? Maybe once. I don't know. I mean, it's a tall task. Generally speaking, to see this is very not normal. It's what made Kyrie and LeBron's game just utterly, just unbelievable. In the NBA Finals on the biggest stage, they did it, right? And so it really is. It was crazy. But guys, I do want to talk a little bit about what the future holds for Boston here. They have a 7-game homestand. They're 2-1 here. I want to more specifically get into a little bit of the Philadelphia game, because tonight you saw 3 guys out of the lineup, one of which being Jason Tatum. Kristaps Porzingis, who is still sick. That illness has been on the injury report now for some time. Starting to question if he's actually sick or if they're giving him a prolonged rest. And Drew Holiday obviously still dealing with that mallet finger. So you guys look at this matchup against Philly. Are we thinking guys are going to be out? Is this a rest period? Obviously, probably no Al Horford. What are you guys seeing the injury report and the injury aspect looking like for this next game?
I want to say this. I think it's going to be similar to what you saw today. And one guy I wanted to mention, I want to see more action from Miles Norris. And I know that seems like why would you want to see him? He's a two-way player and he just came with Boston. Why? Because I think right now it's really kind of focused on just giving players more time. Like right now, you really got to focus on just seeing what other options you said. Like earlier, we got to give it time, like with Jordan Walsh, for example. We got to let players progress right now. And we got to see, with Sam Hauser having troubles, we got to see who can be that next man up. So especially going into a weaker game like Philly tomorrow, I hope that we do give our guys some rest. Obviously, you're going to see Horford not playing tomorrow because he doesn't do back-to-backs. You might see Porzingis make a return, or maybe even having Namey or Luke get the start. And by the way, Rob, I gotta say, you and I, the more I talk to you, the more I see how much we have in common, because I was that guy that wasn't hot on Luke Cornett too. So I had to mention that later.
There were a lot of us. There were a lot of us.
And then he just shut me up. He's like, all right, that's what I love with players, by the way, how they're like, they have those performances and they're like, shut up, be my fan, Like,
right.
That's what I love. It's incredible. Yeah. But it's just tomorrow. It's kind of one of those games where you want to win and you want to put the hammer down on the Sixers, but you also got to look at this. You got to be like, all right, we also got to give guys some other time. We also got to get other people acclimated and get them ready, because come playoff time, if Sam Hauser isn't doing so good, you need a guy to step up. And there's always injuries, and that's the worst case scenario, and we don't want to think about that. But you need to get other guys used to this system. You can't just roll with your 5 or 6, 7 players. You got to get other guys worked in.
And tomorrow's game against the 76ers, this one could be a little bit of a trap game as well, because the Sixers, at this point in time, the Celtics are playing the Sixers in their 4th matchup of the season. The other 3 times included a 20-point blowout for the Boston Celtics last time, but then before that, the 76ers had a 26-point lead on the Boston Celtics and wound up blowing it in the 4th quarter, where the Celtics were able to come back and win that game. But before that, it was the Christmas game. Now, Paul George, Joel Embiid played in that matchup, played in the last matchup between the Celtics and Sixers. So that'll inevitably look much different when that comes across the screen. No Embiid, certainly. Maybe Paul George, who knows when he's ever playing. But the Sixers game, they have a couple of guys who are playing with a lot of energy right now. And the Sixers, they really have nothing to lose. The guys on the roster, they want to get paid. That's the bottom line. They have a couple of veterans who are just kind of swimming around there. Think about Eric Gordon and Kyle Lowry not really playing for too much at this point in their NBA careers. But you have a couple of young guys on the Sixers roster right now actually playing for maybe a contract later on down the line, maybe a role with the 76ers next season when Paul George and Joel Embiid I would imagine they try to run it back next year, as there really doesn't seem to be a way out for Philadelphia. But just looking at the Sixers in their entirety, I mean, really, the roster, it's one of those that you look at and go, okay, the Celtics shouldn't lose a game to the 76ers, although they did earlier this season against maybe a little bit better of a roster, and more like their morals, the morality was up on that roster. The Celtics shouldn't lose a game to the Sixers, but when you have a young team playing with more energy, playing for something in the Sixers, they have nothing to lose. The Celtics coming off the second night of a back-to-back, and in the fashion in which the lineup is going to change a little bit. I imagine we will see Kristaps Porzingis tomorrow. I imagine we will also see Jason Tatum. As for Drew Holiday, it sounds like, look, I'm a little I'm side-eyeing the Drew Holiday injury just a little bit. Drew Holiday said, Gary Washburn tweeted this out, that he essentially had a broken finger. Basically had a broken finger. We've been looking up mallet finger. We've seen the diagrams on the broadcast. Looks like a torn ligament in the pinky. But then when Drew Holiday essentially comes out and says it's broken, well, that's an injury that I don't think could get any better throughout the rest of the season here. When he's out there playing out on the court, I don't see it getting any better in time for the NBA playoffs. But it's also an injury that might potentially be an injury that doesn't get any worse if Drew Holiday plays on it. I think they're giving him an extended rest. I don't know when we're going to see Drew Holiday or what's going to happen from that event, but I think we're going to see Kristaps Porzingis tomorrow. Al Horford likely out of the lineup on the second night of a back-to-back, and we're going to see that, the Horford, Kristaps Porzingis, either both of them play, neither of them play, or one of them plays, and then the other plays. I think Kristaps plays tomorrow with the extended rest. Horford gets a night off, and then Tatum, I think he got the night off tonight because of the second night of a back-to-back, the opponent, and also Tatum. I think there are just more numbers they could draw in for Celtics versus Sixers if Jason Tatum is out there versus Celtics versus Blazers. I don't think Tatum's going to matter either or in the ratings of Celtics versus Blazers, unfortunately, but he will in the Sixers matchup more so. So I think going into tomorrow's game, the Celtics have to definitely bring the same energy they brought throughout the second half tonight. We're probably not going to see more 40-point performances from multiple players on the roster, as that is definitely a rarity. Yet at the same time, I would definitely want to see a little bit more. I want to see a well-rounded scoring game from the Boston Celtics tomorrow. I want to see one of those, because the great performances, the individual performances, have been impressive as of late. But we all know when the entire team is clicking at once, that's when the Celtics are at their most dangerous clip. And we've seen the individual performances, but every single player hitting at an efficient clip. That's what I want to see tomorrow. And thought actually during the beginning of the game we saw that from the Portland Trailblazers, but when you have two role players like you do for the Boston Celtics, who became absolute superstars tonight, that's pretty hard to overcome. But moving forward, the Celtics facing the Sixers tomorrow, it's going to be a little bit of a trap game with the Lakers coming in over the weekend, and a lot of teams overlooking the Sixers right now. But second night of a back-to-back, lineups changing. The Celtics, I just want to see the patented effort out there, but I also want to see just a well-rounded game from everybody, to the point where we can see more rest at the end of tomorrow night's matchup.
Well, and it's funny you bring up ratings. Tomorrow's game is on ESPN, so Jason Tatum probably is going to be slotted in to that game. Don't think it's actually a shoulder. Breaking news. There you go. Some insight. I agree. So Philly, so this is the funny thing, right? You look at Philly's side of things, and they're trying to lose games right now, right? They're looking to drop down, maybe get into the race for Dylan Harper, for Ace Bailey, for Cooper Flagg, a really big top three in this draft class. I think Philly's trying to get their hands on one of them. But also, Seamus, you make a good point. these are games that teams like this show up for, especially Celtics Sixers. There's still a little rivalry there, even though there's not, like Embiid said, there's not much of a rivalry, but there still is one. These are the type of games where they're okay with winning if they walk away on Boston's home floor, taking on the champs. These are the types of games that they're actually going to get up for, and they're going to play. Like you said, guys are on contract. So I agree. This could be another trap game we're seeing out of the Boston side of things. So I think it's really important they do a lot of what they did tonight. Boston was awake. Boston was active. Boston was ready to go tonight. You could tell they wanted to be out there. They wanted to be playing basketball and against the Portland Trailblazers. So they were up. They were active. Brown didn't have a great shooting night, but he was active. He was involved. 8 assists, 8 rebounds. He was there. He was present. Defensively, he did his thing. So a lot of the same. I love you brought up Drew Holiday, because I want to talk about Drew Holiday, because maybe this is a poor vision. But right now, if I'm the Celtics, you hold Drew as long as he possibly wants/needs. If he doesn't come back for the rest of the regular season, maybe bring him back for the last 3 games to get his legs back under him. But I am so okay with that, guys, because this isn't a knee injury, right? This isn't his knees bothering him. This isn't a ligament in his calf. This isn't Achilles. This isn't, something that this is just this is as simple as a broken finger, right? A ligament, you never want to hear ligament, but assuming he can come back, but this isn't taking a toll on his body physically, right? So this rest actually for Drew Holiday can really benefit the Boston Celtics. So if I'm Boston, I'm talking to Drew and I'm looking at Drew on the leg side of things. And we talked about how much basketball he's played over the past year and his age. I'm like, all right, Drew, like, listen, you get ready, get yourself going for the playoffs. Obviously, make sure the mallet finger's good to go. You want him healthy out there. You want to be able to shoot the basketball. If it's on your shooting hand and you can't unbend your finger, it's going to be pretty tough to shoot out there. But guys, I don't know about you, but I'm looking at the Drew Holiday injury and I'm saying, you know what? Maybe this is kind of good. Maybe Drew getting some rest, getting those legs ready for what I think could be a big playoff run for him. This could be good. We might need this.
No, I agree with that. I feel like the most important thing for the Boston Celtics is going into playoffs healthy. That's just what it is. And giving guys extra rest, like you've said it with Porzingis, is this really an illness?
Right.
Just give
hangover, maybe. I don't know.
maybe a little hangover. Just giving these guys the extra rest is just the most important thing. Like, yeah, people are paying top dollars to go to these games and see these players play, but at the same time, as a Celtics fan, are you going to be more upset going to a game and missing out on seeing a player, or are you going to be more happy about them winning a championship? And that's what we got to think as Celtics fans. Now, this is a great opportunity to give them rest. And I think about this. I look at it this way. I would be happy if the Boston Celtics gave players rest on these kind of, weaker games, obviously. And then you kind of, play your players against those big ones. Like LA is one that you need to execute on and you need to have your players there for. But I don't mind with Drew, Rob, like what you said. I don't mind if they were like with Drew Holiday, if it takes you the rest of the season and you want to come back for the last 2-3 games to kind of just get ready, get work in, and just get your feet right, just run around on the court, that's fine with me, because I honestly, the main concern for me, and you guys know it, is going into playoffs healthy. You need a healthy team, especially last year. Obviously, we still won the championship, but we were missing Porzingis, and it's like, how much more would have we done with Porzingis? So this year,
right,
the big thing for me is just healthy playoffs, because you're going to need it. Going up against Cleveland in playoffs, if that is the case, you're going to need your full starting 5 this year. And it's a year where I feel like this year, honestly, you're going to need that whole team with whoever you play, because it's a different look this year. And it's kind of, if you have to give them extra rest, that's fine, because the ultimate goal is going into playoffs healthy.
Yeah, and the Drew Holiday injury right now, I really wonder how much it's going to affect Drew Holiday, because for one, I see it as a potential injury that won't heal until after the playoffs are over. And also from that standpoint, he might need surgery on this injury. I mean, we're thinking about mallet finger, and it's that ligament connects your pinky finger and really all these fingers up here with the knuckles on his pinky finger. That ligament within his pinky finger, Drew Holiday's pinky finger, that might be torn. And when I hear about a torn ligament, that usually means surgery. And from that standpoint, Drew Holiday, if he has surgery on it now, he might be out for a significant period of time. But it might be an injury that I look at and go, well, if it's not going to get any worse, he might be able to play on it. And then there might be some off-season surgery there. There might be some healing that goes on more so over the offseason. And that's not really when ultimately I think that Drew Holiday, if you look at the timetable, when he gets healthy will be over the offseason. The injury might not get better for the rest of the season. But I still look at it and go, okay, if that's the case with Drew Holiday, think about Drew Holiday, some of the best attributes he brings to the floor and to the game of basketball. They're mostly on the defensive end of the floor, and he has some great offensive attributes within his game as well, but those have to do with passing the ball, hitting open three-point shots, sitting in that dunker spot, finishing physical lay-ins for two. That's what Drew Holiday does well on the offensive end of the floor, kind of being that background player, doing all the little things, setting good screens, rolling to the rim, being in the right positions at the right times. That's what Drew Holiday does best on the offensive end of the floor. Some of Drew Holiday's offensive attributes, I almost look at it and go, he might still be able to do a couple of these things at a high level without the pinky or not. I mean, he could be Ronnie Lott and chop off that pinky and go back out there. I mean, really, that's what Drew Holiday, he could be effective in doing that. But defensively, especially looking at that, you don't really need your pinky finger to play good defense. You really don't. I mean, you could have that hand wrapped. You could have a club out there like Jason Pierre-Paul and play tremendous defense if Drew Holiday wanted to. So I look at it from his game in particular, Drew Holiday's game, what the injury is. It is on his shooting hand, his right hand, which does concern me a little bit more than if it was on his opposite hand for shooting purposes and ball handling purposes. But outside of handling the ball and shooting, everything else Drew Holiday does well on the floor for the Boston Celtics, he'll still be able to do whether or not he has that pinky finger. And I'm not saying, he's going to get it cut off or anything, but if it's not a durable thing with on his body, Drew Holiday, if he doesn't need to use it, he'll still be effective out there for the Boston Celtics. And some of the other things like shooting the ball, handling the ball, he might be compromised in a little bit, in a little sense, yet I still look at it and go, well, Drew Holiday, we have other guys who can take over the scoring, take over the shooting, take over the ball handling. Guys like Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown. We see Derek White and Peyton Pritchard, they step up and have amazing nights tonight. And I think we're going to have to see more of that from those players. Maybe not so much 40-point nights, but those players really take over the responsibility of scoring the ball on a nightly basis and handling the ball on a nightly basis and shooting the ball, because Drew Holiday, from an offensive standpoint, he's going to have to be really in the background of the offensive game, doing all the little things. And then defensively, that's where the best part of his game is going to come out. And I think Drew Holiday, this injury, it could end up being an injury that later on down the line, it was painful to play through, not a pleasant experience for Drew Holiday, but it might not affect his ability to play with this Boston Celtics championship level team and really affecting their ability to go back to back or not. Because we know Drew Holiday, how big of a player he can be in that regard.
Right. Exactly. And I would never recommend this. Don't do what I'm doing right now, but I Googled mallet finger. Go see a doctor if you have any concerns or you're convinced you're injured or whatever. But what I will say, Google is spitting out to me that is usually treated with a splint and rest. However, you may need to wear that splint to 6 to 8 weeks. Again, Google, don't recommend it. You can get crazy responses on Google. However, my whole thing with Drew, and it kind of plays into what both of you guys said. Can he give us 35 minutes a game for a whole playoff series where he is the stud that we know on defense? If we can get that out of him, I think we're good. I will say this. I do think you miss more without Drew Holiday than you would last year without Kristaps on a playoff run. I think you do. Because defensively, the dude is our anchor. What he does off ball, how he contests traffic, and then what he can do on ball. I mean, you remember last series, guys, against the Pacers, he made every big play necessary. I mean, he made every big play. In the switchability when he's out there versus when he's not out there, there is no weak link in that starting five. You're closing out the game, and if you want to go one-on-one, you're either going one-on-one against Derek White, Jason Tatum, Drew Holiday, Jaylen Brown, or God forbid, Kristaps Porzingis, and he blocks your shot. So really, to me, guys, Drew would be a bigger hit than Kristaps was last year, in my eyes.
No, I agree with that 100% because I was going to bring that up earlier. I think the thing is, the Boston Celtics are kind of familiar to play without Porzingis. You saw him missing a lot of time last season, and you saw him missing a lot of time this season. Now, the thing with Drew Holiday is, I'm not saying this in a bad way, but we haven't been experienced with missing time without Drew Holiday since he's came to Boston. And that's the thing that's alarming for me. And I love what you said earlier, kind of how Drew Holiday, like, all right, listen, he could give you, Rob, you said this earlier, I think, he could give you a 40-point game if he totally needed to, because that's what he could do in Milwaukee. Milwaukee, he was one of the leading scorers for them. But Drew Holiday here and his role with the Boston Celtics is passing the ball, being a defensive threat. That's what his role is here. And the thing is, that's what we would miss most, is because obviously you see with Joe Mazzulla's style, our defense isn't how it was with Ime Udoka. It's not the exact same. So having Drew Holiday be kind of like your number one defender and missing him for that much time for a whole playoff run, that's alarming. And that would scare me because, again, going back to it, Porzingis, we've had experience with missing him. We've went without Porzingis a lot of the time, and we're familiar with that. We could play without Porzingis, but with Holiday not having him for a playoff series, that scares me, and that's an alarming factor for me personally, though.
Yeah, I'm 100% in agreement with that, in line with that, because Drew Holiday, you look at the guard rotation. You have Drew Holiday, you have Derek White, Peyton Pritchard. And then after that, it really falls off into who? Are we talking about J.D. Davison out there? We're talking about Drew Peterson? We don't really see any other guards coming off the Celtics bench. And that's really what you look at in terms of the big man rotation and thinking, well, if Kristaps Porzingis was out of the lineup, you still have Al Horford, who's sitting there, 17, 18-year veteran big man, still sitting in there within the rotation. Luke Cornett, who's made tremendous strides within the organization. Kata out there can play a couple of minutes if you really needed him to in the NBA playoffs. And Xavier Tillman, let's throw him out there. He can play minutes as well. We haven't used him at all this season, but he was out there during the NBA Finals last year. He was one of the biggest factors in the Celtics walking away with a 3-0 lead against the Dallas Mavericks last year on the road in the NBA Finals. So really looking at the big man core, there's a lot of options outside of Kristaps Porzingis. There's 4 other options the Boston Celtics could really play if they wanted to. All those guys could play minutes, whereas within the guard rotation, you only have Derek White and Peyton Pritchard. And then after that, you don't really have too much, if anything, off your bench if you're the Boston Celtics. Looking at all the guards the Celtics really don't have, the lack thereof. But yeah, Drew Holiday defensively as well. That would be one of the biggest things. Defending, I would specifically say in the Cleveland series, if we were to play a series with the Cleveland Cavaliers, you need Drew Holiday out there to match up with guys like Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell. And if he's not out there, that's when you start ultimately seeing a lot of holes formed in your defense. Now, it wouldn't be absolute Swiss cheese out there like some other teams in the league, but you would see you'd see certain alleviations within the defensive rotation, because you'd see somebody like Drew Holiday taken out of the lineup. Well, ultimately, Derek White is taking over all of Drew Holiday's assignments. Then Tatum is stepping up and taking over Derek White's assignments. And then after that, you're bringing in somebody off the bench who you feel less comfortable with, really defending another team like, say, Cleveland. We saw that on Friday night with Sam Hauser. This was part of the conversation of how Sam Hauser technically was replacing Drew Holiday's minutes. And not saying he had the same matchups as Drew Holiday, but when he's out there, a team like the Cleveland Cavaliers with smart guards and great scoring guards like Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell, they can pick that apart. They can hunt the mismatch and really make the Celtics pay. So that's why Drew Holiday is going to be so big in the playoffs, specifically him being available, him being healthy. And if defense is the only thing Drew Holiday can give the Boston Celtics, he's still an extremely valuable player for the Boston Celtics, even if he was compromised from an offensive standpoint because of what all he brings defensively to the floor. Drew Holiday, it's amazing how many almost MVPs this team has, or X factors this team has, and kind of have our own little names for everybody on the roster. But Drew Holiday is just as important as all these other guys on the roster when it comes to his defensive presence out there and what versatility he gives the Boston Celtics, not only within the rotation of his minutes, but just defending another team out there.
Absolutely.
Now, may I ask a question real quick?
Mhm.
So, with JD Davison, I see him a lot. I see him a couple weeks ago.
You got him started with JD now. You got the main guy going, Seamus.
I know. No, I just gotta say, I know. Like a couple weeks ago, I was seeing that guy every night.
Right.
So I'm a little familiar with him. One thing I will say though from JD is he's a great scorer, but he doesn't give you much defense. So that's definitely where it's a downward slope from Drew Holiday being such a top defender, and then you got JD, who's, I don't want to diss on him, but not the best defender from my personal opinion. But now this is my question. If we're cause of concern for Drew Holiday, is this kind of where you see Joe Mazzulla giving JD Davison more minutes to kind of, just in case?
I'm sorry.
You don't think so?
I'm not a JD Davison
Not this
guy.
season.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm not a JD Davison guy. I think what he's done in Maine is incredible. I think, is there a spot in the NBA for JD Davison? I think the answer to that is yes, I do. I absolutely believe that. Is there a spot for JD Davison to contribute on the Boston Celtics when they're trying to win an NBA championship? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. No.
Nope. No, there really isn't. Like I have so much respect for JD. Like I said, I see that guy every night. Like obviously they're on a long road trip right now, but I was seeing that guy every night drop 30 a night, So he has talent. He has so much talent. And
for sure.
Yeah, and I totally see him getting an opportunity with another NBA team. Will it be the Boston Celtics? I'm sorry, but unfortunately, I don't think so. Because he's the type of player where he kind of, when he plays, he goes out and he'll score on his own. And like we have already scorers here, and now you see Peyton Pritchard could be one of those guys who could give you 40. But JD Davison, we don't need that. So he's gonna be, sorry JD, but you're fun to watch for sure. But with the Boston Celtics, I don't know if you'll be here for so long.
Right.
Yeah, JD Davison, his time just isn't now. Just isn't now. I mean,
Great
I don't
players.
know if it'll ever be, because really defensively, you mentioned he's not bringing you much defense. If you can't play one side of the floor or the other, you're not going to be in the NBA. I mean, we've seen it multiple times in the past. You could have just all defensive specialists. They do nothing on the offensive end of the floor, and they'll actually hamper you, whether it comes playoff time or just in the regular season as is. But then if you're not performing on the defensive end of the floor and you're performing offensively, then, well, I mean, come on. We have superstars who are usually the main focal points of the offense in the NBA. And really, if you're asked to play alongside superstars and your main attribute is ball handling and really on-ball scoring, I mean, that's not really going to fit well with a lot of superstars out there, a lot of stars out there on the floor. And if you're not giving anything from a defensive standpoint, that's going to be a pretty tough uphill battle. So that's the one thing I look at with JD Davison specifically and go, I don't know when his opportunity in the NBA is going to eventually come, because there's that one side of the floor he cannot play. And that's usually the story with a lot of guys in the G League. They're great defenders, but they're terrible offensive players, or they're great offensive players and they're terrible defenders. And really, you need both to be up to par in the NBA. And that's really, if we talk about Peyton Pritchard, obviously he's a tremendous offensive player tonight, 43 points. Got to reiterate that point. But defensively too, he's upped his game in the NBA. And we talk about Sam Hauser. We're in a negative place with Sam Hauser right now. But what got him more minutes was his increased versatility and not being a complete traffic cone out there and bringing something offensively to the Celtics. So you really have to bring something to both ends of the floor. there are going to be specialists out there, shooting specialists, offensive specialists from a passing perspective, or even defensive specialists. But through that, you still have to have a well-rounded game out there on the floor to play meaningful NBA minutes. And that's the one thing I worry about with JD Davison specifically, is that defensive end of the floor. Is he going to be capable of really guarding NBA guards and bigger players when he's switched on them, if he ever gets a chance with the Boston Celtics or any team in the NBA for that matter?
Right. If you look at the framework right now of the NBA, it's very versatility based. Everyone can do almost everything, you know?
Yeah. Can I say something that's kind of a little off topic? I
Go
want
for
to
it.
give my credit to what's his face? I can't, Miles Norris. I couldn't think of the name for a second. I know that's kind of off topic and stuff, and I've kind of been I've kind of been hyped about him.
Hey man, listen, get your hype out. Get your hype out. You've got a Maine native here. I can't diss that.
No, because it's actually funny. So I was looking back because I was like, all right, my first game I went to last year for the Maine Celtics was against the Hawks G League team. And I look back and there's a video of me high-fiving him. He went off in that game and had like 30-something points. So that's a name that I kind of want to kind of see. Obviously, I think he needs to play more in Maine. We kind of need to get him with the system, kind of get him used to playing with Drew Peterson and all of them. But that's kind of a name too that you guys might be shocked, but I could see him potentially getting some time with Boston. He's kind of a name too that I wanted to throw out there. He's
Right.
a specialist.
Well, we've mentioned it here. I think with Seamus last show, maybe. Boston uses their two-way guys, man. I mean, we've seen it this year. It's evident. I mean, look at Neemias Queta and his upbringing, Luke Cornett and his upbringing, Sam Hauser. I mean, those guys came through the G League. They build. I mean, they really do. Joe Mazzulla, Brad Stevens, they really truly do use their G League like a baseball-styled farm system. So I won't knock it. I won't. From a man that watches G League basketball and knows his stuff, if you tell me Miles Norris is capable and in time can show something in Boston, I'm going to be there with you, believing in it.
Now, Griffin, do you have any insight as to why Anton Watson was waived? I mean, what did you see out of Anton Watson in Maine that would have made you say, okay, I can understand the Celtics waiving Anton Watson?
Oh, okay. So this is the thing. When we first drafted him this year, I was already concerned. I was like, all right, why are we kind of drafting this guy who's averaging 3.3 points? Like, what's going on here? What's the reason why we're doing this? Like, I was confused. But I will say this was a complete shocker to me because I've seen nothing but good things from him in Maine. He's had to play a lot of center. We talked about this on my show. He kind of is like a Al Horford. He's gonna give you kind of a 3-point shot, but Maine has had a lot of problems with big men, and he's been able to be a big man there, and he's played a lot of center for them. So it was kind of a shocker to me. I mean, he's the type of guy that is going to go out there and he's not going to give you superstar points. Like, he's not going to give you 20 points a game. Nights I went there, he would give them 4 points a game. So I think that was kind of the cause of concern. So he's not very consistent. But at the same time, he very much so impressed me because I saw his stats at the beginning of the year and I was looking at him. I'm like, what was the reason for drafting him? Like, why did we bring this guy to Boston? There were so many, in my opinion, there were better options on the table. Like, for example, Jack Golke or someone like that. You know what I mean? Like, there were better options. Right. But then I was like, when he came here, that first game I went to, we got blown out by the Westchester Knicks. But I was like, wow, I am really on board with Anton. So to answer your question, I was honestly pretty shocked when I got the news that they waived him. I think the key to that, though, is just inconsistent because he's a phenomenal player. And it's just kind of, I think they were kind of going towards the sign. All right, well, he's kind of more so an Al Horford type player. And we have Neemias Queta. We have big men here. So he kind of doesn't really have a future with Boston. Maybe that's kind of what they went with the route. But it was honestly a shocker to me, to be truthfully honest.
Well, it makes sense that Maine has this big gaping hole at center because we keep taking them. They keep working out down there, so they're getting elevated to the big time roster, right? Nemias Queta and Luke Cornett. I mean, they were spoiled down there. Even let's go back to Taco. Taco didn't work out, but Maine's been spoiled with some great big man play. So, we keep taking them. But I will say this though, I agree with you. I'm not in touch into the whole Maine Celtics sphere. I will say this, I was confused on the draft pick. It didn't really make much sense. It just like frame wise too, it's like, is he really an NBA center? Because his athleticism does not jump off the page. And it kind of feels like you throw it Al Horford. I'm gonna throw it Xavier Tillman. It kind of gave me some Xavier Tillman vibes. And we're seeing with what he's doing. Maybe there was hope that, right, they're kind of looking for that Al Horford replacement. We're going to have Tillman, maybe bring in Watson, and maybe it works out. But again, when you're, what was he, 54? When you're picking from 54, that's what you're going for. You're kind of going for hit or miss. It's either going to work out really, really well, or we're going to waive this guy by the end of the year. So, yeah, no, I'm not too surprised there. But guys, as for tonight, the Celtics, it was a special one, and they were dominant in almost every facet of the game, guys, against the Trailblazers tonight. 128-118 was your final score. Again, Pritchard was your player spotlight, 43 points, 10 rebounds, 5 assists. But I'm not going to leave out my man Derek White, the floor setter. Get that nickname brewing here around the Boston sphere. 41 points, 3 rebounds, 2 assists, 3 steals, added on a block, 4 Yeah, get the shirts going. The floor, you got the anomaly going with your team. I don't know what that's all about. How about the floor setter for Derek White? I think that's got a little kick to it. So 9 made threes from White, 10 made threes from Pritchard, 19 total made threes. I'm gonna throw up the graphic one more time just because I can, guys. Like, oh my god, just dominance.
How do we not set a team record for 3-pointers when we have 2 guys combined for 19 3-point makes between the two? Right. I'm looking at like the beginning of the season, the first game of the season, we nearly set the 3-point record, single game 3-point record as a team. And obviously we know how that story goes. The last 9 minutes of the game, it's just chucking up shots all over the place. But now, as we go into we're almost done with the regular season, 20 games left, or more than a little ways into the regular season. I'm surprised we haven't nearly reached that mark again. I'm surprised, especially on a night like tonight where we have 2 guys combined for 19 3-point makes. 19 between 2 players. I mean, what? You only need 7, 8 more 3-pointers to tie and break the record? And it's a little impressive that we didn't meet that mark tonight. But I wonder if the Celtics will ever challenge that again the rest of the season, because the beginning of the season, it felt like this team was going to be historic from a 3-point shooting perspective. They have been in terms of attempts, right? But the makes,
I think they're. I could be wrong here, but are they not the most makes in NBA history per game? 18.7. I could be off.
It might be. But that's what I'm saying. Like how many we make a game, I'm surprised we're not. Right. We haven't been closer to that single game record mark this season.
Right.
Other than that first game, and even in a performance like tonight, you'd think, 2 guys, 19 3-point makes between the 2 of them. I mean, can the rest of the team make up 7 or 8 3-pointers?
One of 8 from Sam Hauser. Sorry to throw under the bus, doesn't help. 2 of 7 from Al. 0 of 4 from Jalen. Nemias Queta had one, but it was a full court heave. So that is weird though. You have 19, so you need what? Yeah, you need, what was it? 26 is the tied record we have.
I think 26 is the tied record. So you need what? 7 or 8?
You need 7.
Yeah, what if Queta made that? I just had to say that was an incredible shot.
Well, I'm real quick about the Queta thing. He shot that shot, and I was like, oh god, like, it looked weak. I was like, that's not even gonna make it to the free throw line, and it actually was like pretty close. So, it's funny stuff there. But again, so the Celtics are gonna be back in action, guys, tomorrow night against the Philadelphia 76ers. Tip off there is the traditional 7:30. We've been seeing these 7 o'clock games, these 1 o'clock games. Back to 7:30. Against the 21-40 Philadelphia 76ers. They're coming to town against the Boston Celtics, who are now 44-18, up 3.5 games from third place, back 8 from first, as that kind of has gotten out of reach for the C's. But again, 3.5, they're looking to build that lead over New York to take the proper precautions there. for the final stretch of the season. Guys, again, after the final buzzer sounds there, come right back here to the Celtics Talk Weekly YouTube channel for CTW Postgame Show. We'll have you covered live for postgame coverage. Guys, before I sign off, I do want to say, one, thank you so much for watching, the support you've been giving us. And two, hit the like button, right? I'm going to be going a little YouTuber content creator on you. Hit the like button there. Turn on post notifications and subscribe, guys. It helps us out a lot. You guys have been supporting us and showing love. We appreciate every second of it. We're gearing up for the playoffs. We're very excited for the stuff we have in store for you guys. So again, come back here tomorrow night, back to back. It's exciting. Philly, a little sucks. They're a little hanging down there and towards the bottom of the Eastern Conference. No Joel Embiid, obviously, but anytime the Philadelphia Sixers come to town, it should be a fun one. So, guys, again, the Celtics, they win tonight. 128-118 was your final score. Guys, if there's any time to cue the music, it's a win like this. So cue that music. And again, until next time, guys, from all of us, go